on standby here in case there's an operator error. But we're gonna, okay. Oh, there it goes. Oh, great. All right. I think I had it upside down. Well, what I'd like to do first of all is start by showing you where your money goes. And this is, these numbers come from the White House. This is the President's fiscal 2011 budget. And it's a basic pie chart divided up into the basic areas of government expenditure. This is where your money goes. In Washington, we call this mandatory, discretionary versus mandatory spending. It all is discretionary, but those are Washington terms for it. Then on the mandatory side, you have in the maroon areas here several programmatic areas. Down at the bottom there, you see Social Security, and that's about in the corner there. You see the Social Security is about 20% of the pie on the mandatory side there. The Medicare spending is about 13% of the overall spending. Medicaid is about 8%, moving to the left up the mandatory side. The other programmatic areas which are called mandatory are certain programs. The TARP bailout funding is a part of that. Farm payments, nutrition programs. It used to be called food stamp. It's called SNAP now. And other categories of funds that are on autopilot. Social safety net programs that are very important to many people, and they're very helpful and, of course, very sensitive in many ways. That particular area of the budget has grown to 17%. If you add on the yellow area there, that's net interest on the debt. That entire maroon and yellow portion is about 63% of your federal budget. Moving to the right-hand side was what we call discretionary. That's divided in between two categories, security or defense, and non-security or non-defense discretionary. Defense spending is about 20% of the overall budget. Non-security discretionary is about 14%. Now, a lot of you come to Washington in order to talk to us about things like roads and parks, education funding. And that falls in that non-security discretionary funding area, and that's only about 14%. What happens, though, a lot of times in Washington is, in terms of talk of balancing the budget, you tend to look at that non-security discretionary spending. And that's where most Americans are actually interfacing with their government. So it's difficult to balance the budget around a 14% slice of the pie. Now, where does your revenue come from? Basically, on the right-hand side, in that bluish area, it's the individual income tax, and that's about 44% of the revenues to the government. Now, remember that top number up there is $2.56 trillion. That's our revenue estimate. The spending estimate on the previous page, again, was $3.8 trillion. So that creates a big budget deficit. 44% of the income comes from individual income taxes. Now, about 50% of Americans do not pay any individual income taxes. About 10% of Americans pay over 70%. If you're working, you're going to pay payroll taxes, and that's 36% of the budget, that maroon slice there. The corporate income tax is about 12%, and other excise and gift taxes make up the balance. The distinction here is a $1.267 trillion budget deficit. That's actually lower than what it currently is, which is nearing $1.5 trillion. That's, again, next year's predicted budget based upon the revenue shortfall and the spending projections. Now, how did we get here? This is spending over the last decade. If you can see, beginning in the year 2000, it's climbing up to where we currently are, projected for 2011 at $3.8 trillion. You can see the percent of increases over the year. Now, again, the problem here spans the political partisan divide. There is a lot of blame to go around about the ever-increasing expenditures. It has particularly accelerated, though, in the last few years. If you look at between 2008 and what is projected to be in 2011, that is almost a 30% increase in federal spending. And what's worrisome about this is that does this new levels of spending actually become baselines for the future? Now, the problem with all of this is, of course, the accumulation of debt. In 2000, the debt was $5.6 trillion. Currently, it's $13.3 trillion. By 2015, it'll be almost $20 trillion. The consequences of debt, we all know those. Here is who owns the debt. The Federal Reserve and intergovernmental transfers is about 41%. Private investors down at the bottom is about 28%. Foreign debt holders about 30%. China is now one of our largest foreign debt holders at getting close to $1 trillion, between 8 and 900 billion. The consequences, this clearly is a matter of justice. We are pushing taxes and the bonded indebtedness to our children and grandchildren. We are selling the nation's assets overseas, and the potential creation of inflationary impacts as the government crowds out the private sector for more and more borrowing. The impact, of course, is higher taxes, higher interest rates, and lower economic expectations. Congressman Terry talked on this a bit, and I think it's time to consider a long-term structural solution to this. Again, when you do not have a mechanism in Washington to check this level of indebtedness, it's time to say, is there a systematic change that we need? I would favor consideration of a balanced budget amendment as well, with exceptions for emergency circumstances in which that could be overridden. I think that's very important because, again, when the government has a big credit card, it simply pushes and hides the economic impact of all this debt into other places, whether, again, that's selling the assets overseas or that's creating inflation as the temptation to potentially monetize this debt is there, or it's simply pushing on this indebtedness to the future generation. The line item veto is, I think, something important legislative initiative. I supported giving that to President Bush. I support giving it to President Obama. Now, there was a constitutional test about this. The way you overcome that, I think, is once the president actually uses a red pen, it comes back before the legislative branch for another vote, and then it passes the constitutional test that were ruled on earlier. I think this is a direction we need to head in as another mechanism by which we get spending under control. There is another initiative out there that I really think deserves consideration, the biennial budgeting cycle, moving to that. Right now, as many of you are very much aware, Congress deals with the budget all year long. In fact, Congress basically has no budget right now. It manifests itself in the consideration of various appropriations bills, many of which do not get passed. They're all lumped together at the end of the year in some sort of emergency way in what's called an omnibus. Nobody knows what's in it. It's a huge amount of spending. It's a very poor way to govern. To govern is to choose, and to budget is to make those choices. Yes, it is hard and difficult, but I think you deserve a government with its fiscal house in order. It's going to take some shared sacrifice in order to accomplish this, but I think most Americans are growing in their awareness that government overreach and overspending are actually undermining our economic well-being, are actually creating the conditions of more uncertainty in the marketplace, and which is creating hesitancy and risk aversion among entrepreneurs. And I think a clear plan that talks about long-term budget structural solutions, as well as some belt tightening that returns to spending levels just a couple of years ago, would actually send the right signals, help turn around the economy, improve the outlook for job creation, and guess what? Increase revenues to the Treasury. So it's incumbent upon your leadership to get this done. It's incumbent upon you, though, as we begin to make these hard decisions, just like all of us had to do in local government, that you give some consideration to what we're doing. We're past the point where somebody can say, hang me last. This is about America's economic well-being and our economic future. And that future is inextricably intertwined with the social well-being of our people, who we have to lead and you have to lead as you do your part in creating jobs, allowing people to use their gifts and talents of intellect and the gifts of their own two hands to make things for consumer benefit, but also to provide a living, good livings for their families. So we're all in charge of this, and again, the day of reckoning, I believe, is here. Your leadership must lead. This transcends the political divide. America has awoken to the reality of just how deep this hole is, and I hope now is sensitized to the fact that the hard decisions are coming in order to get the fiscal house in order, but that will set us on a new course that leaves everybody in a much better position than we're currently heading with this economic drift that we're currently in. So with that said, I appreciate the time that you've taken to come this morning, and we look forward to your questions, and of course you're always welcome to come to Washington. That's one of our favorite times of the week, to get together with you as a delegation, and we appreciate your interest. Thanks so much.